So, as many of you know, that last night was a blood moon, or the longest lunar eclipse of the century. And I was just going to merely go out in my backyard, look up in the sky, take a few shots, maybe a little bit of video. That never manifested. What happened is that I decided to look out in the backyard and I couldn't see any moon. Now, living in a city where a lot of row houses, 4 or 5 stories tall, your horizon is this little strip above your head. So you have to get out from within the row houses and move on out to more open skies. So I went down the street and tried to look down the main street, see if it was over there. Walked all around, and I live on a hill here. So I decided to make my way halfway down the hill, because there the very practical, clever Germans had put a parking garage for the hospital there, where it goes up about 4 or 5 floors to about halfway up to where I live. And the top deck of this parking garage ends up being a very much an observation deck, shall we call it, for certain events like New Year's. People hang out there and watch the fireworks because you get a broad view of the entire valley, as you will see here. And I thought maybe I could see it from there. And when I walked out there, I was expecting to be alone. It's just a lunar eclipse. But it turned out to look more like a scene from Close Encounters, where they're all sitting there waiting with their eyes looking into the sky for some heavy object to appear. So I waited and we couldn't see anything. It was still, the sun was below the hills, and I live in what's considered a valley, right? So it's this serpentine kind of very shallow river that must have carved this valley in between these hills over many millennia or something. And so you have this very low area surrounded by these 2 steep hills on either side. And if you get on the sides of the steep hills, you get a very large vista. And so when I showed up there was actually quite a few people standing around. And we couldn't see anything because we're still in a valley, and the horizon that we have is the tops of the hills on either side of the valley. It's not a flat land area where the moon would be lower. And I had seen in the internet, there was a website on YouTube for live showing, and in Rome they were showing it was already visible, so I thought I could see it, but I didn't factor in the hills, and so couldn't see anything. I was waiting a while. I thought maybe I didn't check the right time or the right direction, so I decided to hoof it back home. It's about a 3-block walk. I had already walked all around looking for a good vantage point to view this heavenly event, and make it back home and check, and the optimal time hadn't even started. We still had about 10 minutes or so, and so I decided to grab my camera, tripod, hoof it back out there. Sure enough, when I got there, it was in a direction I wasn't really expecting. I thought it was further to the left, but it was more to the right, and because of the fact that it was in the penultimate timing of the eclipse, it was very dark. And then, as you may notice in the horizon, you're looking at a very large distance, and all the air in between there tends to obscure that a bit. So you've got like pollution and particles and all that kind of stuff that you will notice at sundown, for example, and things seem hazy. But if you look straight up, the sky is relatively clear. You can see stars and whatnot. So as you can see from the video, it was very hazy at the horizon. It's a valley, and people who live in valleys, Californians may well know that pollution and whatnot tends to stay in the valleys, and doesn't, because the wind blows over the hills, and so you don't get a lot of fresh air here. There's a lot of people who complain of circulation problems and health problems and breathing problems. One disclaimer, even though Europeans use much less energy than, say, Americans, there's much more pollution here and air pollution. And it's not because they use more, but it's because there's more people crowded into a smaller space, right? So you're in a small room with a bunch of smokers. It's going to be much more smoke in that room than if you're sitting outdoors with even more smokers, right? So, and Germany is roughly a fifth the size of America, but all squeezed into a size that's roughly the size of Wisconsin. So you do get a lot of pollution. For those of you thinking of expatriating or moving abroad because you've just been fed up with America, you might want to keep that in mind. So anyway, so then it was, as you can see, it's very dark, but it started moving up and it was easier to see. Again, I'm working with a camera. You can't use a flash. Your flash isn't going to reach the moon, so you're going to have to work with your aperture and the time you're going to leave your aperture open on your camera to get to the best picture. And so I tried my best, and this is what I came up with. And it just turned into what was going to be just something in my backyard or maybe in the front yard and just looking up in the sky, turned into hanging out with this motley group of probably around 100, maybe 50 to 100 people, all staring up at the sky, people walking up to me. The other thing that made me even want to do this video was it was very serendipitous that the confluence of events there. So as you can see from the picture, there's not just the moon, blood moon, but you can see Mars just slightly below it, and then some so a kindly old couple. First, the husband came up to me. Many people were coming up to me because they're all just filming this with their phones, and I'm here filming it with a semi-professional camera. And the first husband came up and said, "Look straight up. It's the ESS, which is it's ISS for in English. It's the International Space Station." So here I am at this once-in-a-century event, coupled with Mars. The confluence of Mars right under it and the ISS flying right over at that very moment. So, a person with, actually myself probably in my younger years would at least think of the slightest possibility that this confluence would be some kind of harbinger of events. But in my old cynical, skeptical years, it just was a nice turn of coincidence. So I thought I'd share that with all of you. And this was my evening running around town trying to find the moon first, then finding a cult-like gathering of close encounters type viewers peering into the night sky for some kind of celestial event. And then lots of people running around talking and partying and playing really bad pop music, all as the background music for what was very difficult to film event. But I can at least say I was there, and I'm sharing it with you.
We're so happy you found us.